Hello friends, and welcome to my channel. I'm Lydia, the Halfling Seamstress. We've been traveling in time for our last couple of episodes, but for today, we're only going to be traveling back to January. When I was starting to work on my Luthien gown for the Foundations Revealed contest, I started by making a mock-up. I picked up a cheap floral bedsheet that I had every intention of tossing or using for some other mock-up once I was done. When I first bought it at the thrift store, it was folded up, and the lighting made it look like vintage wallpaper in the worst possible way. However, once I actually turned it into a dress shape and tried on the mock-up, I went, oh my goodness, it's so cute! I decided that it would make the cutest everyday princess cottagecore type summer dress. So here we are. The weather is finally turning warmer, yes? Yes? Yes. In Canada, one can never be 100% sure until, like, June. So I'm going to upcycle my bedsheet mock-up and make an everyday princess summer dress, because as awesome as floor-length drapey elven sleeves are, they're really not practical for the grocery store. Sadly, there's not a lot of the basic construction to see, as I whipped up the mock-up pretty fast when I was prepping my Luthien gown. If you want to see the inner workings of how it fits together, I suggest checking that video out. It'll be down below, or up there, somewhere. For those who know seam terminology, it's a basic maxi dress with princess seams. But there are a few changes that had to be made to take it from a rough mock-up into an everyday wearable garment, starting with the waistline. Butterick patterns assume a starting body height of 5'5" to 5'6". I'm just barely 5 foot. So naturally the waistline had to be raised a few inches. Now that it's going to be more than just a mock-up, I looked at the dress with a more critical eye. As you can see, the waistband wasn't entirely even, and it still sat a bit lower than I was happy with. This was a finicky part to adjust, but it has mostly worked out. I made the center front seam my base measurement for adjusting all the way around, and raised the waistline to a place I was happy with. My arm ended up being in the way for most of this shot, but this kind of gives an idea of how I worked my way around the dress. Okay, confession time. If you have seen my Luthien video, you might remember this moment. When I put it on, there was a 4-inch gap in the back. Yeah, I still don't know what went wrong there. I will now admit where I went wrong on my Luthien gown. My mock-up was too small in the back. I have come to terms with it. I didn't realize it at the time. I thought it was a good fit, and I was in a hurry. Thankfully, I was able to remedy the problem on my Luthien gown, but it meant I also had to remedy it on this dress. To do so, I cut a narrow strip of fabric and added it to the center back seam. Seems easy? Oh boy, was it not. Because while the dress was too small at the waist, it also overlapped at the top. No straightforward solutions there. I also trimmed it so the extra piece would end at the waistline. I cut the dress apart at the waist, repinned it to where I wanted the new waist to sit, and stitched all the way around. Now because I moved the waistline up, even with the extra piece of fabric, there was more skirt width than bodice width. So I ran a gathering stitch at the center back and gathered it to fit the bodice. I box pleated the new piece at the neckline to reduce the loose fit at the top. Perhaps not a conventional tailoring technique, but if anyone asks, I'll tell them it was loosely inspired by the back of the 18th century's robe à la française. Now to put in the closure. This pattern calls for backlacing, but I wanted this to be an everyday dress that I could get in and out of myself. So, zipper it is. However, when I dug through all the notions in the house, I could not find a dress-length zipper except in Fire Engine Red. Not very cottagecore. So I went with a side zipper instead. I sewed it in by hand, as I dislike sewing zippers on the best of days, and I knew this one would be fiddly. I also got all the way finished and realized I sewed it in completely upside down to how I intended it to be. On to the sleeves. I debated for a while about what I wanted the sleeves to look like. Do I use the included pattern and make 3/4 length sleeves? Short sleeves? Puff sleeves? I ended up going with floaty cap sleeves after looking at what fabric I had left and realizing that I had 2 identical pieces that were the perfect shape. I pinned them in, working from the center of the top to the bottom underarm seam. I also basted them in place, both to try on for fit, as well as to hold it in place better while sewing them in. For some historical garments, even after sewing machines were invented, sleeves were one part that still tended to be put in by hand. The hem also needed some adjusting, for practicality's sake. Flowing trains are amazing, but realistically don't work in everyday life. Although who knows, maybe they'll make a comeback. Anyway, I knew I wanted to keep the length, but not the train. So I marked the shortest part of the hem, which was one of the side seams, and cut the entire skirt to match. It was then time for the long process of hemming everything. I decided to hem everything by hand with a felling stitch, as this would give me a lighter, more flowy looking hem, as opposed to a top-stitched hem. I made my hems very narrow, as rolled as I could manage. Rolled hems can be a bit of a fiddly thing, but for straight seams in particular, using your needle to roll the hem can speed up sewing time quite a bit. Everything then gets pressed to make it nice and smooth. I didn't want my dress to be too lacy and frilly, as I wanted it to still look like a grown-up dress, not like I was trying to be 6 years old again. But having recently watched an excellent video on insertion lace, I couldn't pass up the chance to use a little bit of vintage lace and try my hand at it. And the dress did need a belt. I'll spare you the details of my failed attempt of funky angles, in which I grossly overestimated my abilities. Instead, I opted for a straight line. I'll link the video below, which explains it far more eloquently than I can, but essentially, I pinned the lace up the middle of the belt, sewed it down with a running back stitch, cut open the fabric behind the lace, and pressed it away from the lace. I then folded the outer edge of the belt in, and then whipped both folded sides together. Unfortunately, after all that work, when I actually tried it on with the dress, it kind of buckled and made the dress pucker in a weird way. So I opted instead for a vintage belt. But it was still a valiant first attempt, and I can't wait to try more insertion lace projects in the future. I then finished all the raw edges by zigzag stitching them. And there we go, an everyday princess cottagecore dress that came from a mock-up made out of a bedsheet. It's not perfect, but what things in life ever are? I like it. I will absolutely be wearing it this summer, and if you stick around, you'll probably see more thrifted and upcycled projects like this down the road. So if you want to see more videos like this, albeit a little less haphazard, feel free to hit the like and subscribe button. Now on to some May Day frolicking in the sun. First we shoots the video, then we gets the ice cream.